The night of March 8, 2014, started like countless others at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The air was thick with the familiar hum of a busy travel hub, a place of goodbyes and new beginnings. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a modern Boeing 777-200ER, sat on the tarmac, its lights shimmering against the dark sky. It was preparing for a routine overnight journey to Beijing, China, a flight path traveled thousands of times before without incident. Inside, the cabin crew made their final checks, and passengers settled into their seats, their thoughts on the families, friends, or business meetings that awaited them at their destination. The aircraft was a symbol of modern connection, a steel bird designed to bridge continents and cultures with remarkable safety and precision. At 12:42 a.m. local time, the plane's powerful engines roared to life, and it gracefully lifted off from the runway, climbing into the night. For the first 38 minutes, everything about the flight appeared perfectly normal. The aircraft ascended to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, following its designated route northeast across the Malay Peninsula toward the South China Sea. Air traffic controllers in Kuala Lumpur tracked its progress, a small, predictable blip on their radar screens. The last communication from the cockpit was a calm and routine sign-off as the plane prepared to enter Vietnamese airspace. "Good night, Malaysian 370. These were the last words ever heard from the flight, a placid farewell before an unimaginable silence. Suddenly, at 1:21 a.m., Flight MH370 vanished from civilian radar screens. Its transponder, a device that broadcasts the plane's identity, altitude, and speed, was switched off. This single act was the first indication that something was terribly wrong. For air traffic controllers, a plane doesn't just disappear, it is a meticulously tracked object. Its sudden absence from their screens was alarming, a digital ghost where a solid aircraft should have been. The routine flight had abruptly deviated from its script, leaving controllers in Kuala Lumpur and their counterparts in Ho Chi Minh City scrambling to make contact. Their calls to the cockpit met only with an unnerving, empty static. The silence was absolute, a void that would soon be filled with confusion and fear. The transition from a normal flight to a global mystery happened in a matter of moments. On the ground, the world was still asleep, unaware that a massive aircraft carrying 239 souls had just slipped off the grid. The plane was no longer communicating, no longer visible on civilian systems, and no longer flying toward its destination. It had become a phantom, veering off its path and into the unknown. The initial assumption of a catastrophic technical failure, or a crash into the South China Sea, would soon be challenged by data that painted a far more complex and deliberate picture. The mystery of MH370 had begun, sparking a decade-long search that would push the limits of technology and human endurance. Beyond the technical details and the unfolding mystery, the story of MH370 is fundamentally a human one. On board the aircraft were 239 individuals, each with their own story, their own dreams, and their own network of loved ones waiting for them. The passenger list was a mosaic of nationalities, a small global community brought together for one fateful journey. The largest group, 153 people, were from China, many of them returning home from a trip. This group included a delegation of celebrated Chinese artists, who had just attended an exhibition in Kuala Lumpur. They were painters and calligraphers, creative souls whose work brought beauty to the world, now suspended in an unknown fate. The flight also carried 50 Malaysian nationals, including the 12 members of the flight crew. The pilot, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, was a 53-year-old veteran with over 18,000 hours of flying experience, widely respected by his colleagues for his professionalism and passion for aviation. His co-pilot, 27-year-old Fariq Abdul Hamid, was on his final training flight in a Boeing 777. The rest of the passengers hailed from more than a dozen different countries, including Indonesia, Australia, India, France, and the United States. There were engineers heading to new assignments, tourists returning from vacation, and families with young children embarking on new adventures. Each empty seat at a dinner table represented a universe of loss. As the hours passed with no word from the plane, a dreadful sense of anxiety began to ripple across the globe. Families who had gone to Beijing Capital International Airport to greet their loved ones were met not with warm embraces, but with a stark white arrivals board that showed the flight's status as delayed. The initial confusion slowly curdled into panic. Airline officials gathered the families into a private room, their faces grim and their answers vague. The wait was agonizing, a torment of unanswered calls and frantic checks of news websites. The human cost of the plane's disappearance was becoming devastatingly clear, measured in the tears and bewildered expressions of mothers, fathers, husbands, and wives. The weight of the tragedy rests on these individual stories. There was the young couple on their way to a belated honeymoon, the father returning to his children after a business trip, and the martial arts expert who had been demonstrating his skills abroad. These were not just numbers on a passenger manifest, they were people in the midst of their lives with futures that were abruptly and inexplicably stolen. For their families, the lack of answers was a unique and cruel form of torture. There were no bodies to mourn, no crash site to visit, and no final goodbyes. There was only a gaping void, an absence that would haunt them for years to come. In the immediate aftermath of MH370's disappearance from civilian radar, the logical assumption was that the plane had suffered a sudden and catastrophic failure over the South China Sea. This was the last known area of contact, the point where the aircraft was supposed to be handed off from Malaysian to Vietnamese air traffic control. Based on this information, the first search and rescue operations were launched in this region. A massive international effort quickly mobilized, with ships and aircraft from Vietnam, Malaysia, China, Singapore, and the United States converging on the waters between Malaysia and Vietnam. It was a race against time, driven by the desperate hope of finding survivors. The search teams scoured the surface of the sea, their eyes peeled for any sign of wreckage, an oil slick, or personal belongings. The world watched, holding its breath, as news reports showed planes flying low over the waves and boats crisscrossing the vast expanse of water. Hopes were briefly raised when an oil slick was spotted, but it was later determined to be from a ship. Another report of a floating object that looked like a life raft also turned out to be a false alarm. For days, the search continued with a frustrating lack of results. The sea offered no clues, no debris, nothing to suggest that a 200-ton aircraft had crashed into its waters. The initial focus on the South China Sea was entirely reasonable based on the available civilian radar data. Every procedure and protocol pointed to this location as the most probable crash site. The multinational coordination was impressive, showcasing a global community coming together in a moment of crisis. But as the search intensified, a troubling realization began to dawn on investigators. They were searching in the right way, but they were almost certainly searching in the wrong place. The complete absence of any floating wreckage was highly unusual for a modern aircraft crash, suggesting that the initial assumptions about the plane's fate might be entirely incorrect. This fruitless search lasted for nearly a week, a period of intense activity that ultimately yielded nothing. It was a critical time lost, spent combing an area of the ocean thousands of miles from where the plane likely ended its journey. The mystery deepened with each passing day. If the plane didn't crash in the South China Sea, then where did it go? The answer would come not from what was seen on the surface of the ocean, but from faint, invisible signals that had been recorded by military radar and satellites. Data that would soon rewrite the entire narrative of the flight's disappearance and redirect the search to a remote and desolate stretch of the southern Indian Ocean. While the world's attention was fixed on the fruitless search in the South China Sea, Malaysian military investigators were examining their own radar data, which painted a much different and far more disturbing picture. Unlike civilian radar, military radar does not rely on a plane's transponder. It works by bouncing radio waves off objects, meaning it could track the aircraft even after it had gone dark. This data revealed something astonishing. Shortly after its transponder was turned off, MH370 did not simply vanish. Instead, it made a sharp, deliberate turn to the west, flying back across the Malay Peninsula. This was not the action of a plane that had suffered a catastrophic failure. It was the maneuver of an aircraft under someone's control. The military radar track showed the unidentified aircraft, believed to be MH370, flying over the northern part of Malaysia and out into the Strait of Malacca. It continued flying westward, passing north of the Indonesian island of Sumatra, before finally flying out of the range of Malaysian military radar. This new information was a bombshell. It meant the plane had been airborne for at least another hour after it disappeared from civilian screens, flying in a direction completely opposite to its intended flight path. The revelation dramatically shifted the investigation, transforming it from a search for a crash site into a hunt for a ghost flight that had been deliberately diverted. The next crucial clue came from an unexpected source: a British satellite company called Inmarsat. Their satellite, positioned in a geostationary orbit over the Indian Ocean, had been receiving a series of automated pings from the aircraft. These were not communications containing data like speed or altitude, but simple hourly handshakes, signals that confirmed the plane's satellite communication system was still powered on and trying to log on to the network. The last of these pings was recorded at 8:19 a.m. Malaysian time, more than 7 hours after the plane had taken off from Kuala Lumpur. This confirmed that the aircraft had continued to fly for hours after all other contact was lost. By analyzing these satellite pings, experts at Inmarsat were able to perform a groundbreaking calculation. While the pings didn't reveal the plane's exact location, they did provide information about the distance between the satellite and the aircraft. This allowed investigators to plot two vast arcs of possible locations for the final ping, one stretching north over Central Asia, and the other curving south deep into the Indian Ocean. The northern arc was quickly deemed less likely, as the plane would have had to cross the airspace of several countries with sophisticated military radar systems without being detected. The southern arc, over one of the most remote and desolate stretches of ocean on the planet, became the new, terrifying focus of the search. With the new data from military radar and the Inmarsat satellite pings, the search for MH370 shifted dramatically. The focus moved from the relatively shallow and busy waters of the South China Sea to the immense, deep and treacherous southern Indian Ocean. This new search area was located thousands of kilometers southwest of Australia, a region so remote it is often called the Roaring Forties for its powerful winds and colossal waves. The scale of the challenge was almost incomprehensible. Finding a needle in a haystack seemed simple by comparison. This was like finding a needle in a stack of needles, somewhere at the bottom of a cold, dark and stormy ocean. What followed was the largest and most expensive search operation in the history of aviation. Led by Australia, Malaysia and China, the effort involved dozens of countries, which contributed ships, aircraft and advanced technical expertise. For months, military planes flew long, grueling sorties from Perth, Australia, their crews scanning the churning ocean surface for any sign of debris. The search area was vast, constantly shifting based on new analysis of the satellite data and drift modeling. But the ocean guarded its secrets well. Despite numerous sightings of floating objects that raised hopes, none were ever confirmed to be from the missing aircraft. The surface search, like the one before it, ended in failure. The next phase of the search moved from the surface to the seabed more than 2 miles below. This required highly specialized equipment, including deep-sea autonomous underwater vehicles and towed sonar scanners. Over the next 3 years, a fleet of survey ships painstakingly mapped and scanned a 120,000 square kilometer priority area of the ocean floor. This was an unprecedented undertaking, revealing a previously uncharted underwater landscape of deep canyons, towering volcanoes and rugged ridges. The ships operated in some of the most hostile maritime conditions on Earth, battling fierce storms and enormous swells that often forced them to pause their operations for days at a time. Despite this monumental effort, which cost over $150 million, the official underwater search was ultimately suspended in January 2017. After covering an area of the seabed roughly the size of Pennsylvania, searchers had found nothing. The announcement was a devastating blow to the families of the 239 people on board, who had held on to the hope that the search would provide definitive answers. In 2018, a private American company, Ocean Infinity, launched its own no-find, no-fee search, using a fleet of advanced underwater drones to cover a new area. But after several months of scanning, their search also ended without success, leaving the final resting place of MH370 one of the world's most profound and enduring mysteries. For more than a year after MH370 vanished, the search was defined by a complete lack of physical evidence. Not a single piece of the aircraft had been found, fueling a wide range of theories about what might have happened. That changed on July 29, 2015, when a piece of aircraft debris washed ashore on Reunion Island, a French territory in the western Indian Ocean, thousands of kilometers from the underwater search area. The object was a flaperon, a part of an aircraft's wing. Investigators rushed to the scene, and serial numbers on the part soon confirmed the heartbreaking truth. It was from the missing Boeing 777. After 16 months of searching, the first tangible proof of the plane's fate had finally been found. The discovery of the flaperon was a pivotal moment. It confirmed that the plane had, as the satellite data suggested, gone down in the Indian Ocean. Ocean current analysis and drift modeling supported this conclusion, showing that debris from the presumed crash site off the coast of Australia could have floated westward to Africa over many months. The location of the find was consistent with the Southern Arc theory, and provided the first concrete evidence to counter the more outlandish conspiracy theories that had taken root in the absence of facts. For the families, it was a moment of profound and conflicting emotions, a confirmation of their worst fears, but also the first small step towards some form of closure. In the years that followed, more than 30 other pieces of debris suspected or confirmed to be from MH370 washed up on the coastlines of Mozambique, Tanzania, South Africa, and the islands of Mauritius and Madagascar. These included a section of an engine cowling with a Rolls-Royce logo, a cabin interior panel, and a piece of the outboard flap. Each discovery was like a whisper from the waves, a small, fragmented message from the lost flight. Investigators meticulously examined each piece, looking for clues about the final moments of the aircraft. Some experts suggested that the condition of the flaperon indicated it was extended at the time of impact, which could mean the plane was under control during its final descent. However, while the debris confirmed that the plane had crashed, it could not answer the biggest questions: why and how. The pieces were too few and too scattered to pinpoint a precise crash location. The main underwater wreckage, including the crucial black box flight recorders, remained elusive. The discoveries validated the general search area in the southern Indian Ocean, but the ocean is vast, and the currents are complex. The debris was proof of a tragic end, but it was not a map. It provided a somber conclusion to one chapter of the mystery while leaving the central puzzle, the location of the main fuselage and the reasons for its diversion, unsolved. In July 2018, the Malaysian government released its final safety investigation report, a comprehensive 495-page document detailing the 4-year investigation into the disappearance of MH370. The report compiled all known facts, from the aircraft's maintenance history to the background of the crew and the analysis of the satellite data. Hopes were high that it would provide a definitive conclusion to the mystery. However, the report ultimately raised more questions than it answered. Its primary conclusion was both clear and deeply unsatisfying. Investigators could not determine the real cause for the disappearance of the aircraft. The world was left without the closure it so desperately sought. The report did make one significant finding. It concluded that the plane's deviation from its flight path was not caused by a mechanical failure or a computer malfunction. Instead, the evidence strongly suggested that the change in course was done manually, under the control of a person. The disabling of the communication systems and the sharp turn to the west were deliberate acts, but the report stopped short of identifying who was responsible. Extensive background checks on the pilot, co-pilot, and all passengers found nothing suspicious. There was no evidence of foul play, no history of mental illness, and no motive that could be uncovered. The why remained a complete blank. This official finding left the door open to endless speculation. The theory of a rogue pilot, while not supported by any direct evidence, remained a prominent possibility in the public imagination. Other theories included a hijacking by an unknown party, or a scenario in which everyone on board was incapacitated by a sudden decompression event, leaving the plane to fly on autopilot as a ghost flight until it ran out of fuel. The report could not definitively rule out unlawful interference by a third party, but it also found no evidence to support it. The investigators admitted they were stymied, stating that the team is unable to determine the real cause for the disappearance of MH370. The report's inconclusiveness was a source of immense frustration for the families of the victims. They had waited 4 long years for answers, only to be told that the official investigation had reached a dead end. The document laid out what happened. The plane turned around and flew for hours into the southern Indian Ocean, but it could not explain the most critical part of the puzzle. Without the main wreckage and, most importantly, the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder, the truth remains locked away at the bottom of the sea. The report was not an end to the story, but merely a formal acknowledgement of how little is truly known. For the families of the 239 people aboard MH370, the past decade has been an agonizing journey of grief, uncertainty, and relentless advocacy. Today, on August 8, 2025, More than 11 years have passed since they last heard from their loved ones. The passage of time has not healed their wounds, instead it has prolonged their suffering. The lack of a crash site, of final remains, and of a clear explanation has trapped many in a state of ambiguous loss, a psychological limbo where mourning cannot fully begin because hope, however faint, has not been fully extinguished. They have been forced to navigate a world that has moved on, while they remain anchored to the moment the plane disappeared. Throughout the years, these families have transformed their personal pain into a powerful, collective voice. They have organized, lobbied governments, and relentlessly pushed for the search to continue. Groups like Voice 370 have become crucial advocates, ensuring that the world does not forget the souls lost on that flight. They have traveled to Malaysia, Australia, and China, holding vigils, meeting with officials, and demanding transparency. Their quest for answers is not just about finding a plane, it is about finding a measure of peace, about honoring the memory of their relatives, and about ensuring that such a tragedy can never happen again. Their resilience in the face of official silence and public indifference is nothing short of extraordinary. Their emotional journey has been a roller coaster of hope and despair. Every rumored sighting, every piece of debris found, and every announcement of a new search has brought a surge of anticipation, often followed by crushing disappointment. They have had to become amateur experts in aviation, satellite technology, and oceanography, poring over technical reports and challenging official narratives. Some have even launched their own private investigations, raising funds to analyze data and explore new theories. This tireless crusade has come at a great personal cost, impacting their mental health, their finances, and their daily lives. But their determination remains unshaken. The core of their demand is simple. They want the truth. They want to know what happened in the cockpit that night. They want to know why the plane was diverted from its course. And most of all, they want to bring their loved ones home, or at least know where they rest. The official apologies and financial compensation offered by the airline cannot fill the void left by their loss. Only answers can begin to provide the closure they have been denied for so long. As a new search begins, their hopes are once again cautiously raised, praying that this time the ocean will finally give up its secrets and end their long, painful wait. After years of stalled efforts and fading hopes, a new chapter in the search for MH370 is beginning in 2025. In late 2024, the Malaysian government announced its decision to resume the hunt, a move celebrated by the families of the victims. The contract has once again been awarded to Ocean Infinity, the American marine robotics company that conducted the last private search in 2018. This time, however, the company comes armed with what it describes as credible new evidence and analysis, pointing to a more precise and promising search area within the vast southern Indian Ocean. The mission represents what could be the final, best chance to solve aviation's greatest mystery. The new search will operate on the same no-fine, no-fee basis as the company's previous attempt. This means Ocean Infinity will bear the full financial risk of the operation and will only be paid, a sum reportedly around $70 million, if it successfully locates and verifies a substantial portion of the aircraft's wreckage. This arrangement has been hailed as a responsible way forward, as it does not commit taxpayer money to a search with an uncertain outcome. For Ocean Infinity, the motivation is not just financial, it is also about demonstrating the power of their advanced technology and providing the long-awaited answers to the world and the families. The search, which is expected to take place between January and April 2025 to take advantage of favorable weather conditions, will utilize a fleet of state-of-the-art autonomous underwater vehicles. These robotic submarines, capable of operating at depths of up to 6,000 meters, will be deployed to meticulously scan a targeted area of the seabed spanning approximately 15,000 square kilometers. While the exact location remains confidential, it is believed to be based on a refined analysis of the satellite data, combined with new drift modeling from the debris that has washed ashore over the years. This focused approach is a significant departure from the broader searches of the past. The world watches with bated breath as the search vessels head out to the desolate expanse of the Indian Ocean. For the families, this new effort is a fragile beacon of hope in a decade darkened by uncertainty. As Malaysian Transport Minister Anthony Loke stated, the government's primary commitment is to the next of kin. The goal is to finally find the wreckage, recover the black boxes, and give the families the closure they have so long been denied. Whether this new technological push will succeed where previous efforts have failed remains to be seen. But for now, there is a renewed sense that the final chapter in the tragic story of MH370 may finally be written.